on. That is a subtle reference in terms of open source, but has huge implications, I think, for most of us. And I'll give you an example of something. Happened this morning. I was at a security committee meeting, and that's where the business and IT leaders that govern the information security program get together. I generally try to entertain them for an hour and a half, and that's usually a struggle. So we actually talked this morning about a vulnerability that was discovered in some code. And it was we identified the root cause of the vulnerability. We identified the code, and we identified in that particular incident where it was identified. We had the fix that we put in. Now here's the issue. It's a component. The root cause was in a software component that we built. Now theoretically, what if that vulnerability So what if that vulnerability was in an open source component, and what if we weren't sure where that open source component A came from, B, where it was resident in which applications, and C, what the risk of that is by default if we don't know where it is in our own environment. Now, maybe your guys' environments are simplistic enough to have the answer to all of those questions, but I think in any
well controlled enough.
Either or, but I know in our environment, answering that question of where else is this particular module in which application across our portfolio of software is not an easy fix. It's typically one of those things that I look at and I say, I better get somebody else to do this because I'm going to be spending all week trying to do this. And so I'll get somebody else to spend all week to do that. But the point is it takes all week to actually figure that out. And so there are capabilities emerging. Fortify, I think, was one product that was mentioned. There are other products in the open source area that help not only you manage open source code, but also all of your code, as well as not only identifying the components of it and their origin, but software vulnerabilities that might be specific to those components. So there's hope on the horizon. I think there's tools out there. And I think what Jennifer pointed out is spot on, that this is going to start to create a little bit more awareness of it for those of us that want to improve and make our programs world-class.
So Neil?
So you know, just a couple of thoughts came to my mind when I read the OCC bulletin, and I actually read that only after he told me to. So I thought it was a terrific foundation, right? I think there is a need to build upon and improve that. But if you're a hardcore developer who actually practices application security, you may brush it off. But if you're in a management capacity, I think it's written in plain English that you can actually read, and it makes sense in the first read. I think it's extremely easy to understand as to what they're trying to say. And the only thing that I had was, its limitation in focus, because it really applies to just banking sort of industries. And I think we need to find a way to lobby the OCC to make that more mandatory across a much wider sort of a sector, I would say, just not financial services or banking. But it's got so much of common sense built into that, right? If you read through that, I think we need to find a way to have a much wider sort of an audience embedding and incorporating some of those principles within the organizations.
I agree, Sunil, and I think the other aspect of this is it is driving the OSS community and the vendors, not just the financial services companies, to work on improving the security. Joe?
I'll throw in my 2 cents.
Okay.
I mean, definitely encouraged by the content in the bulletin. It is a bulletin, so it isn't anything that's required. It's sort of, heads up. The bulletin reminds national banks that their technology service providers that is an important component of information security. That application security is an important component. So that to me is, they should have sent out a note to the bank saying, it's an important component of mortgages to make sure your clients can pay the mortgage. It seems somewhat intuitive, a little bit basic, but definitely a step in the right direction. I'm encouraged to see that they're recognizing the concern. I'm also encouraged that they mention OWASP by name and they include the top 10 list So I think these are a testament to the efforts that OWASP has made as well. You know, as all the members, you guys all, you know, I'm sure most of you are members, if not, join. So I think it's a testament to that. I'd like to see more. I'd like to see something with more teeth. I'd like to see something, I mean, the mention to open source, okay, you know, open source. But in my mind, if I can see the source, at least I know what I'm dealing with, you know what I mean? If it's a closed source environment, then, well, I kind of would like to see something that requires, you know, application vendors, you know, software vendors to encourage them to really incorporate some of these controls into their code. That would make me feel a little better. It's kind of like that whole Rumsfeld doctrine: the enemy you know, the enemy you don't know. I mean, I guess in my mind it'd be a greater thing to really elicit and require some action, not just from banks as was stated, but from software vendors, and make this more of a, you know, put some teeth in the process. Kind of a sort of a broken record, I think, my mantra now. But I'll pass it on.
Yeah, just there's not much more I can add to everything that's been said. The one thing I would say though is I think the you know, you can probably see the OCC bulletin as a leading indicator of a whole bunch of regulation that's appearing in other sectors, both domestically and internationally. So this is probably, you know, I think we're you know, to steal the Gibson's quote, the future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed. So I think, you know, we're definitely seeing in many sectors around the world, and you know, whether it's energy, whether it's defense, whether it's government, there's plenty of other stuff in draft at the moment that could hopefully in the next 12 months be a significant turning point, especially for the OSS community as well as commercial off-the-shelf software. We don't need to convince ourselves to do this. Like with any bits of regulation in the financial sector, typically the premium firms at least have recognized the need to do this for a while, and it's just the regulations often follow that. But it's, generally speaking, we agree with the all forms of regulation in this space, and I think if more can be applied to other sectors, the better for everybody.
Thanks, Phil. I guess there's general agreement that it's a good thing. Maybe it requires more teeth and may happen over time as it gets refined. Okay, moving on to the next question. Business application owners have aggressive schedules and revenue targets. Oftentimes, security is considered shortly before application is going live because of a policy or other corporate mandate. In these situations, application security is viewed as inhibiting business velocity. So in your experience, what has worked in being able to sell value of information security to the business application owners?
I'll take a stab at that first. I think the interesting thing is when you go back to the stuff we've been doing for a number of years now, the risk of stating the obvious, when you first start doing it, you just got to draw the line and say no. Certainly we've had experience of plenty of firms where attaching application security at the last minute before deployment is certainly a pressure point. You know, a number of years ago, we definitely drew the line on this. You know, I still carry some of those scars, but we got everybody through it. And once you get through that approach, it then becomes easier to start selling the benefits of this stuff. But I'm not going to. I don't think we should paint a rosy picture that you can't do this by first selling the benefits. You start doing this by drawing the line and then increasing the scope of this by selling the benefits. And certainly today, what we find is, you know, a lot of our development community sees this as improved time to market. They've seen ancillary effects of code analysis that improves the performance and reliability and resilience of their software base. So people have largely moved on now from just doing this for good security reasons to pass the change control gate to actually seeing this does add a lot of value into their development cycle. I think, again, at the risk of stating the obvious, it's certainly something